Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to ask my colleagues to oppose this bill. Earlier this year in this legislature, we passed a significant restructuring of Michigan's auto no-fault insurance system. Among the many issues I had with the legislation, and one of the most notable oversights was the failure to devote the necessary resources to empower Defts to protect consumers. Now, I understand my colleague or my other colleague that spoke from Detroit lifted up issues that were challenging for this body to really embrace and comprehend, but I think the narrative that he was trying to lift up was the fact that we passed the legislation and now we're not doing our due diligence in funding the required FTEs. During our insurance committee, our chair invited in a speaker from St. Johns Hopkins University that highlighted and lifted up the importance nationally to adequately determine rates at a national level, that you have to have the number of actuaries necessary to look at that. In the Department of Insurance and Financial Services, having none or one, and then the legislation that we passed made a recommendation to provide 12, and we're not doing that today in this budget, is really what is so perplexing. We should all have a moral imperative, if not an ethical imperative, to adequately fund the legislation that we passed by this body. And to not do so, especially being a woman of faith, to me, it's a sin of commission, a sin of omission. We're knowingly pushing forward a budget that we know will not adequately be able to address the legislation that this body passed. Now, I have to digress a little bit because in a recent article that was put out by the Free Press, they said the legislators are the fault of this bill passing. And I have to make it really crystal clear to the Free Press and any other outlet. It wasn't all legislators that passed that bill. It was not. I did not support it. I did not support it. And this is the reason I did not support it, because I know months later we would do something to undermine the very premise that we put forward, or the legislation that we put forward, saying that we would put actuaries in place in that department. So this budget woefully underfunds that ability and undermines our original intent. And so I appreciate your leniency, but you know that it is applicable to what we're talking about today, because we're not funding the very portion of the bill that we passed to ensure those savings. So I really have to call on my colleagues to have a conscience, to have a measure of sincerity, especially those that really practice faith. You know, 2 Peter chapter 2:21 said, "For I would have been better for them to not have known the way of righteousness, to have known it and to turn away from the holy command." Our command in this body, all of us that took an oath to protect our consumers, our constituents, and to make sure that we do right by them, is to not knowingly pass a budget that undermines the bills that we put forward. So I'm urging my colleagues in strong opposition to this budget, and make sure that we do our due diligence and adequately fund the actuaries that are necessary to truly advance consumer protection, to make sure that we fix the flaws in the bill that was passed in this body. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have little girls, 3-year-old little girl, Amora Harris, that is counting on us to fix the flaws and to adequately address the deficiency that exists in this budget today. Thank you so much.